the forgotten memories that changed our relationship forever. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. The voice on the tape called me son, but it wasn't my father. I pressed pause because the word landed like a dropped wrench on a tile floor, small, ordinary, but impossible to ignore once it rattled under the cabinet and hid there. I'm Jordan, 31, the least dramatic person you'll meet, a library archivist who spends most days labeling acid-free envelopes and coaxing meaning from smeared ink. My job is to keep other people's memories in order. Funny how I never check my own. The tape came from a cardboard box the flood coughed up in Elaine's basement this morning, after last night's storm pushed seawater through our street, Shoreline Avenue, for the third time this spring. I was there to help move soggy photo albums off the floor when a collapsed shelf revealed the box, duct-taped, grease pencil note, winter. The basement light flickered like it had stage fright. Elaine is 61, my mother by adoption and temperamental by design. We've been polite strangers in the same town for years. We manage birthdays and weather. We don't manage history. Priya, my sister, likes it that way. She says some drawers stay closed for a reason. I usually agree. But the first cassette slid out wrapped in plastic like a fish, and habit took over. Date the label, November 12, 2002. Clean the heads, copy to digital, document the container. That's when a man's voice, low, careful, said my name. Then, son, and asked forgiveness for something I did not even know was broken. I stopped the transfer and stared at the little red counter ticking overeager seconds. If the confession belonged to the person I always avoided naming, then my life had been arranged around a story that could be wrong. If it belonged to someone else altogether, the story might be worse. I thought about the stakes, and they weren't abstract. If I'm wrong and stir up old ash, Priya will cut me off. Elaine will retreat behind polite smiles until the end of days, and the town, our town that loves a porch whisper, will decide what happened for us. If I'm right, we might owe the past an apology. I took a breath, pressed play again, and the voice said a date, an address, and a promise that made my hands go cold. Then he said, "Ask Elaine why winter never ended for us." I didn't tell Elaine right away. Instead, I did what I do at work. I made a log. Basement, north wall, steel shelf, third rung from bottom. Box, double-walled, duct tape frayed, grease pencil winter. Cassette, Maxell UR, 60, handwritten label in black Sharpie, left slant, likely Elaine's. Date on label, November 12, 2002. Outside, the gulls screamed above the flooded curb as if arguing facts. Childhood with Elaine was tidy if you liked blanks. She cooked on Sundays and kept the calendar on the fridge like a treaty. I learned to read faces the way some kids learn constellations. There were stories we told guests. The move from Ohio, the blue house with the tilting porch, the way Shoreline High's marching band sounded from our yard. There were stories we never told at all. I asked about my adoption once, 14, mouth full of courage and cereal. She said, "The papers are locked because the past is closed." I said nothing for 6 years. Last month, on her porch, we fought like strangers. I had forgotten to bring a dessert to Priya's birthday. Elaine said reliability was all some people ever had to offer, and some people offered too little. I said reliability was a dull knife that still cut. She stiffened and served coffee to the wind. We lasted 8 minutes. Priya's position never wavers. Privacy is the only wall that doesn't rot. She protects Elaine because someone must. She protects me from myself because she believes curiosity is just loneliness in a lab coat. We are siblings by stubbornness more than stories. I wrote all this in my log because memory is a weather vane. I dated it, May 14th, 9:22 a.m., and I argued with myself on the page. Then I wound the tape back and listened for the second minute, when the voice began describing a winter I don't remember living. He mentioned a snowstorm that killed the power and a rolling flashlight, too precise to be invented. Our family calendar for January 2002 shows 4 smiley stickers. In the margin by the 15th, a faint erased word. Clinic. Overwritten with choir. Elaine called down, careful voice asking if I needed towels. I lied that I was just sorting. I realized the past wasn't closed. It was only misfiled. And then the voice spoke my name with a different last name. The box yielded more than tapes. A Ziploc of photos with dates that didn't agree with their shadows. A receipt for a diner called Harbor Light, stamped December 21st, 2001, shoved into a church cookbook from 1999. A VHS labeled Priya's first recital, though Priya never took piano. The contradictions were small, like Ms. Buttoned shirts. You could pretend not to notice, but something tugged at your throat all day. I spread everything on a folding table next to the dehumidifier and made columns. Media, date, label, contradiction, source. The archivist in me enjoyed the order. The son in me felt seasick. At work, I scanned microfilm till my eyes throbbed, then caught myself labeling a donor file private, do not post, in letters larger than policy allows. Mr. Ruiz tapped the glass. You're filing the present again, Jordan, he said. He taught me U.S. history my sophomore year. He recognizes when timelines slide. Do you remember a heavy snow in '02? I asked. We had black ice and school delays, but not 3 days dark, he said. Why? A tape says otherwise. Tapes don't lie, he said, then softening. But they do forget. In the evening, I brought the receipt to Elaine at her kitchen table. She made tea like an apology and stared too long at the thermal ink. The Harbor Light closed after the hurricane, she said. We stopped going. This says 2001. She folded the receipt once, twice. Paper fades, she said. Memories do too. I wanted to let the drawer stay closed. I wanted to be reliable and dull and thanked for it. But the box kept whispering corrections in the shape of tape hiss and penciled triangles, and I started to doubt the map I'd been using to walk around my own house. I played the VHS in the library's back room, our last working machine, and a living room blinked up that wasn't ours yet. Green lamp, crocheted Afghan, a kid in red socks not named Priya banging 2 spoons. The date stamp read April 7th, 2003, months before we moved to Beachview, and the curtains in frame belonged to Harbor Lane. On the back of a pier photo, a note in a different hand. Elaine plus J, first day, after papers. No year, no last names. A thumbprint rubbed the J thin. The phone in my pocket buzzed with a voicemail from 2002. The voicemail wasn't delivered, it was recovered. Our phone company finally released a batch of inaccessible backups after system maintenance. An email said. The oldest message was from November 2002. I put it on speaker at Elaine's table while the dehumidifier hummed like a distant highway. A breath, a cough, then the same low, careful voice. Jordan, if you're hearing this, it means the plan succeeded. What plan? I asked the air. Elaine stirred her tea for a long time without drinking. The next morning, a certified letter arrived addressed to Elaine. Unpaid storage unit fees. Unit B, 17, Harbor Secure Storage, 33 months overdue. I showed her. She said it was a mistake. Then she searched a drawer for a key I'd never seen and told me I shouldn't come along. We drove anyway, Priya behind us in her Corolla like a chaperone. The manager slid the door and a smell unfurled. Paper and mothballs and the sweetness of old plastic. Stacked banker's boxes, each with a season scrawled across the front. Winter, spring, fall. One said after, which felt like a dare. Priya said, we're not doing a movie. I said, we're doing records. Elaine said nothing. Inside after, beneath a thrift store sweater and a faded parade program, was a letter on county letterhead. Petition to establish temporary guardianship. Minor. Jordan ____, petitioner. Elaine ____, hearing date. December 17th, 2002. Attached, a signed notarized statement from a man I didn't know claiming to be my biological father, consenting to the arrangement for safety. My stomach went cold and complicated. Adoption, yes, but guardianship first? I thought I knew the sequence. I thought we all agreed what winter meant. At the bottom was another cassette, this one labeled EL plus J, final. I looked at Elaine. She looked at the floor like it might answer for her. Mr. Ruiz met us there by chance, or so he claimed. He said he came to pay for his late wife's sewing machine he'd kept meaning to donate. He took in the boxes, the letter, the way Elaine's hands shook only when she set them down. Paper doesn't lie, he said, but it does hide context. I slipped the tape into my backpack and felt like I had stolen a time bomb with my name etched on it. Back in the car, Elaine whispered, "Don't play that where I can hear." Elaine's house held its breath the way old houses do when gossip arrives before the people. Priya took command of the kitchen like a crisis manager and brewed tea strong enough to walk. I put the guardianship papers on the table as if they might burn a hole through the wood if I held them longer. "This is a misunderstanding," Priya said. "Temporary could mean anything." "It means what the stamp says," I answered, too sharply. Elaine touched the letter as though reading Braille. "We did what we had to do," she said. "Who's we?" I asked. "Adults," she said, and winced at her own word. We sat through a silence that made the clock's second hand sound like a metronome training a beginner to be less clumsy. "Jordan," Priya said, softening, "you don't have to be the town historian for our lives." "That's exactly who I am," I said. "For everyone else's family, I am careful with their facts. I'm asking to be careful with ours." Elaine's eyes went somewhere far. "There was a man," she began, then stopped. "There were promises. There were threats. And there were winters we don't speak about because the pipes freeze when we do." "Is that a yes?" I asked. She shook her head. "It's a boundary." I felt the axis tilt. Duty to truth on one side. Duty to the breathing people at the table on the other. Mr. Ruiz texted me. "Just because you can open a file doesn't mean you should, but sometimes it's the only decent thing left." I wrote pros and cons on a napkin because lists are my coward's prayer. Elaine watched my pen and said, almost kindly, "If you keep going, the story you love won't survive." "What story do I love?" I asked. Elaine stared past me. "The one where hurt is simple and the villain doesn't share your last name." Priya laid both hands over the papers. "We can pay the fees, return the unit, shut the door again. Not every truth heals." I pictured the flood rearranging boxes like a dealer shuffling cards. Chance had already decided we knew too much to unknow. "If we lock it up," I said, "we choose to forget on purpose." Elaine said, "If you play the tape, don't make me hear it." I slipped the cassette into my backpack and stood because sitting felt like surrender. On the porch, Mr. Ruiz waited, holding a key Elaine didn't notice missing. I carried the tape to the library's back room, where the scanner whines like a tired kettle and the old microfilm reader throws a halo on the wall. I logged the cassette as EL+J, final, item 004, container after, source harbor secure storage B, 17, shelf 3. I put on headphones and pressed play. The voice named a hospital I knew, St. Albans, and a date I didn't. December 18th, 2002, Pediatrics, room 314. He mentioned a plastic bracelet with my name and a last name that wasn't mine. I opened the county clerk's index on the terminal and searched guardianship filings across that week. A docket number blinked. 02 G 1749. I printed the stub and circled the filing date, the same day as the hospital wristband. The tape hissed, then, "If Jordan asks, tell him winter bought us time." I stopped and wrote down the exact phrasing because precise words matter. At lunch, Mr. Ruiz brought soup he pretends he makes but clearly buys from the church kitchen. "You look like a postcard that forgot where it was mailed," he said. I showed him the docket stub and the hospital line. He nodded, an old historian's slow agreement. "If the dates don't fit the story, change the story," he said. "Not the dates." I drove to St. Albans with a notebook and a promise to myself to leave politely if asked. The records office smelled like copy toner and the sweet dust of closed cabinets. A clerk glanced at the docket number, then at me. "You'll need a release," she said, "or someone in the file to request it." I texted Elaine a photo of the form, then didn't send it. I texted Priya instead. "Do you remember me being sick in 2002? She responded with a single period, then, "We don't do this." I stared at the form until the fluorescent light buzzed too loud to bear. A vending machine jingled down the hall like half-hearted sleigh bells. The clerk looked at my face and lowered her voice. "Sometimes families keep braver secrets than outsiders imagine," she said. "But the file will still be here next week." I thanked her and steadied the paper as if it were a small living thing that might bite. On the way out, the security guard asked me, gently, if I was lost. I said yes and folded the form into my pocket because hiding it felt like telling the truth slowly. Then I saw the name, Elaine, handwritten on the release template's sample line. I realized someone had already requested these records once before. I needed corroboration that wasn't family. The county's public terminals flashed their screensaver owls as if guarding wisdom for the price of patience. I typed 02 G 1749 and chased cross-references. Continuance January 10th, 2003. Conversion petition June 5th, 2003. Adoption finalized October 22nd, 2004. The dates were a staircase made for careful feet. I pulled microfilm for the Township Weekly and fed it to the reader. January 2003. A photo of a downed power line after last night's squall, not the 3-day blackout on the tape. But the police blotter listed a wellness check on Harbor Lane during a domestic disturbance that never became a story. I wrote the address down. I walked 2 blocks to Harbor Lane because walking is research when you have nothing else. The greenhouse at number 12 still had that crocheted Afghan in the window from the VHS. People reuse patterns of comfort even when they move. Mr. Ruiz met me halfway, saying he happened to be driving by. A lie he wears like cologne. You're blinking like you're translating, he said. I told him about the adoption date. He said, that's not a betrayal, it's a map. Back at the storage unit, Priya stood with folded arms as if they were a door. Return the boxes today, she said. Pay the fees, I'll split it. I pointed at a manila envelope in spring, marked Harbor Lane, tax. Inside, a property tax receipt for 2003 paid by J. Trust, trustee, Elaine. I had never heard of a trust with my first initial. Another paper, a bank cashier's check, memo line Q fund, amount $4,800, dated December 16, 2002. Mr. Ruiz squinted. Q could mean quitclaim, he said, or quiet. The envelope also held a Polaroid of me and Elaine on a pier, my hair half-grown, both of us wearing those cheap foam-soled sandals. On the back, after papers, in the same different hand. I checked the timestamp on the photochemistry. It matched a lot sold in early 2003 at Granger's Pharmacy. Evidence doesn't argue. It repeats itself until you're polite enough to listen. I called the clerk's office to ask about the adoption file. Sealed, the voice said kindly. But a party to the case can motion to unseal limited records. The motion requires an affidavit. The affidavit requires a statement of compelling need. The need requires admitting I don't believe the family story is told. I pressed the phone to my chest and closed my eyes because the hallway smelled like the winter of cleaning supplies and save decisions. The tape used the word plan, and plans leave paper footprints bigger than guilt. I realized my footprints were now alongside theirs. I finally played EL plus J, final end to end, transcribing every pause the way we log oral histories. Bracketed sigh, cough, door shuts, elevator ding. The man's voice named the what plainly, an itemized confession without motive. There had been a guardianship transfer for me on December 17, 2002 to Elaine, a property arrangement the next day that placed Harbor Lane under a short-term trust for J, and a bank agreement with penalties if either party contacted the other for 12 months. He referenced records at Boxwood Bank under file SEAGLASS, and a key taped under the silverware tray. That was not a metaphor. Back at Elaine's, I lifted the tray with hands that shook. Scotch tape, yellowed and stubborn, held a small brass key, stamped BB. Priya watched from the doorway. Don't, she said. This isn't curiosity, it's an appetite. It's a record, I said. At Boxwood Bank, the manager examined the key, then a ledger, then my grown-up face for traces of a child. He returned with a shallow gray box and a waiver that required Elaine's signature. I called. She answered with silence heavy enough to measure. It's a file labeled SEAGLASS, I said. If I open it without you, I'll still learn it existed. A long minute. Then, I'll come, she said. In the conference room, we sat with the box like cautious dinner guests. Inside, photocopies of a quitclaim deed, a court-stamped temporary order, and a sealed envelope addressed in block letters. T.O. Jordan, after 20. I was 11 in 2002. After 20, came and went without a key. The envelope contained a certified copy of a birth certificate with my middle name and a last name that never appeared on our fridge calendar, plus a hospital discharge paper for me at age 11 with a diagnosis line redacted. What, then, a trust for a house, a guardianship transfer, a sealed diagnosis, a non-contact agreement, and an alias I apparently wore like a winter coat for a season. The stakes sharpened around the house title and the medical note. If the trust conditions weren't met, a clause threatened reversion or claim. The clerk circled it with a pen. Reversion triggers if guardianship isn't converted by June 2003. It was. We kept the house. We kept me. I had the pieces and none of the motive. Across the table, Elaine's hands lay open like empty bowls. I told you winter bought us time, she said. But time charged interest. I wrote a plan because plans keep panic on a leash. Step 1. Catalog everything. Tapes, photos, deeds, receipts, voicemail transcripts, docket numbers. Step 2. Make a timeline with 2 columns. What we believed, what paper shows. Step 3. Decide the venue for disclosure, private, then official if necessary. Step 4. Guard the fragile things. Elaine's dignity, Priya's fear, my employment if this turns sensational. I'm not famous. I'm the person small museums trust with their grandparents' letters. But news in a coastal town floats. Someone will net it. I scan the documents at work after hours, naming files like I name everything. URMODA, source, desk, VR. A pattern emerged you could show to a stranger without instructing them what to feel. I typed a 1-page memo for DR. 1. The records officer who advises the library on privacy. I need procedure, I wrote, and a way to present facts without spectacle. She replied in 12 minutes with a list. Chain of custody, redaction standards, consent forms for living subjects, options for in-camera review if a judge becomes necessary. Procedure was oxygen. I called Mr. Ruiz and asked him to be present as a friend, not a historian. He said yes as if he had been waiting on the porch for this exact knock since 2002. Then I called Priya and asked her to come to listen, not to bless. She said she would if I promised not to ambush Elaine. No ambushes, I said. We'll schedule the air. We settled on Friday at the clerk's office's mediation room because neutrality matters and rooms remember less than houses do. I prepared a packet labeled SEAGLASS evidence, a table of contents, short summaries in plain language, and copies for everyone. At the bottom, I added one question bolded for myself. If the motive is love, can it still be wrong? The night before, I couldn't sleep, so I drove to the Harbor Lights old address and sat in the car where the diner once breathed coffee into the cold. The asphalt wore its ghosts plainly, an outline of tile where the entrance had been, a patch of lighter blacktop where the grease trap was dug out. Evidence remains even when purpose closes. I whispered to nobody. If you meant well, why hide so well? The wind off the water answered with a smell like copper and old sugar. At home, I packed the tapes, the photocopies, and the brass key into my messenger bag like I was leaving for an ordinary shift shelving other people's stories. I set my alarm like a person expecting morning and wrote 3 words on a sticky note. Protective truth, please. We tried to have a normal family dinner the night before the meeting, which is to say we performed normal until it rattled. Priya made dal and rice. Elaine set 3 plates with that careful neatness that pretends to be calm. I put my bag by the door like a pet I didn't trust around food. We talked about the weather because small talk is a kind of helmet. Then Priya's eyes slid to the messenger bag. Take it upstairs, she said. Not at the table. It's just paper, I said. Paper has teeth, Elaine whispered. The radio in the corner hissed to life with a storm alert, and we all laughed too loud at the absurd timing. I used laughter to fetch the bag and move it to the hall bench. When I came back, Priya was holding the EL+J final cassette like it was a match. If this is the spark, we can choose not to strike it, she said. Don't, I said, softer than I meant to. Elaine's hand moved, fast, automatic, toward the trash can pedal, and in that movement I saw the whole winter. The reflex to dispose, to clean, to keep tidy what reality refuses to. I took the tape back and put it in my pocket. We're not destroying evidence, I said. We're choosing an adult room to hear it. The oven clicked off, and the house exhaled. Mr. Ruiz knocked and stepped in without waiting, a habit small towns forgive elders for. He brought a pie we didn't need. There's no comfortable way to eat truth, he said, setting it down. You chew, or you choke. Elaine gripped the back of her chair. If I sit tomorrow and you parade me with papers, I walk, she said. No parade, I said. A conversation with a table. Priya shook her head at our metaphors, then surprised me by placing her phone face down, a white flag. If we're doing this, she said, we're doing it quietly. We ate like diplomats. After, I rinsed plates until the water ran cool, and, over the tap's whisper, Heard Elaine in the hallway with the bag. I dried my hands and found her there. Fingers inside the pocket where the tape lay like a sleeping animal, her face tilted with the concentration of someone defusing an old bomb by muscle memory alone. "Please," she said, so gently I almost mistook it for thank you. "Don't make me remember that night out loud tomorrow." The clerk's mediation room looked like a dentist's waiting room that forgot its magazines. A round table, 4 chairs, a cheap fern too honest to be plastic. A sign on the door, "Please keep voices calm, sound carries." Dr. Wen arrived with her binder of forms and a cardigan that made people tell the truth. She explained ground rules. We speak one at a time. We look at documents, not each other's throats. We pause if anyone needs water. I laid out the packets labeled SEAGLASS evidence and put the EL+J final cassette in the middle like an unwrapped present nobody wanted to claim. Elaine stared at her hands. Priya sat with her knuckles pressed together in a triangle under her chin. Mr. Ruiz leaned back as if willing to turn into furniture. "We're here because dates don't match stories," I said. "And because I love you in a way that wants the facts right." Dr. Wen nodded to me to continue. I placed the guardianship order on the table, December 17th, 2002. Then the property trust, then the hospital discharge with redacted diagnosis, then the envelope marked after 20, then the voicemail transcript. I used plain sentences. This says I was placed in Elaine's guardianship temporarily. This says the Harbor Lane house was put into a trust with conditions. This confirms I was in St. Albans around the same time under a different last name. This envelope contained my birth certificate copy. This voicemail refers to a plan I didn't know existed. Priya's jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt. Elaine took a breath that sounded like winter under a door. "I will tell the motive," she said, "if you promise not to make it a legend." "We promise to make it accurate," Dr. Wen said. Elaine nodded and looked at the cassette as if it might blink. "The man on the tape is not your biological father," she said. "He was the person who could sign when the person who should sign could not. He was the legal stranger who agreed to be visible so the actual danger looked elsewhere." Mr. Ruiz's eyes closed, briefly, as if in prayer over a finished equation. Dr. Wen clicked her pen. "Let's pause before we listen," she said, "and write the questions we are willing to answer today." Then she pressed the play button. The room shrank to the size of a cassette's ribbon. The voice filled our laps. "Jordan," it said, "we did this so the man following your mother would stop tracking you by her name." Elaine closed her eyes. Priya's mouth opened then shut. "Elaine took guardianship for 1 winter, and we moved you so the trail would go cold. The trust on the house was collateral to keep your mother safe in another county. We chose a new last name because the man knew the old one. He named dollar amounts that matched the cashier's check for $1,800 to satisfy an old lien that could be used to find us, $320 for a bus ticket, $150 for a motel in Port Dauphin where someone waited. He never named my mother, only her, as if syllables were a form of witness protection, too. We're not heroes," the tape said. "We were scared. We may be wrong." He described the storm that made the power go for half a day, not 3. He admitted the tape dramatized for future compliance. "If you ever unseal," he said, "forgive us our theater." The redacted diagnosis? "Follow up," he said, "for the concussion from Harbor Lane, the night he pounded the door." Mr. Ruiz whispered, "Jesus." Dr. Wen held up her palm, a quiet-down blessing. The voice continued, a notarized promise that if Elaine converted the guardianship by June, the trust would vest to prevent a reversion claim someone could use as leverage. "You were not purchased," he said, almost begging the future for mercy. "You were shielded by paper." The motive arrived, not grand, but practical love laced with fear. Elaine's shoulders rounded like someone who'd finally put down a heavy box after a long hallway. Priya released a sound that might have been a laugh if it didn't break in the middle. "We could have told him at 20, she said. "We tried," Elaine said. "And then you got the job at the library, and all you did was archive. And I couldn't bear to watch you catalog this, too." The tape ended with that line again. "Ask Elaine why winter never ended for us." And Elaine, looking at me without flinching, said, "Because spring would have made you look. After you pull a nail that's been holding 2 boards together for 20 years, the wood remembers. You can push the boards back, but they creak now." Dr. Wen explained next steps. With the affidavit and Elaine's consent, The court could unseal limited portions to correct property records and append a note to the guardianship file. Priya asked if anyone else would read it. The judge, the clerk, Dr. Wen said. Not the paper. Not the neighbor's porch. We signed forms that looked like every form and also like spells. Mr. Ruiz walked us out and stood with me under the murmuring HVAC. You'll pay a price anyway, he said. Families always invoice in rumor and silence. At work, I mis-shelved 3 microfilm reels and answered a donor email with, "Thank you for your patience," when I meant, I don't know what patience is for. The library director noticed my hands shaking and offered time off. I declined because routine is my stitching. That evening, Priya texted, "Mom." She still writes Mom. "Wants tea tomorrow, no documents, just breathing." I went, and Elaine made chamomile like an earnest ritual. "You're angry I didn't tell you," she said. "I'm angry the story made me small," I said. "I would have carried it." She shook her head. "You were a boy who counted crows and put their numbers in the margins of library books. I needed you to be a boy who believed in weather." The court date arrived like an ordinary Tuesday with a heavier door. The judge looked at my affidavit, at the taped under the tray key, at the SEAGLASS file. He granted a limited unseal, a clean letter explaining the trust's purpose so the title insurance could stop flagging Harbor Lane as contingent, and he stamped the guardianship record with a note. Converted to adoption, protective purpose, no fraud. On the steps, a reporter asked if we were correcting history, and I told her, honestly, we're filing a footnote so the main text can breathe. My job strained. Yes, rumors in a small town ride bikes without helmets. But the director backed me, and Mr. Ruiz taught an extra evening class while I took 2 afternoons off to sleep. We paid the storage fees, inventoried the boxes, and donated everything that wasn't ours to keep. When we returned to Shoreline Avenue, a neighbor's porch light blinked twice, the old small-town sign for "We see you," neither blessing nor curse. I unlocked Elaine's door and smelled something burning. It was only toast, but the smoke alarm made a sermon of it. Elaine waved a dish towel at the ceiling while I pulled the battery, and Priya opened windows. We laughed, too loudly, until the room settled. It felt like a rehearsal for future panic we planned to greet with ordinary remedies. We started therapy with Dr. Wen's colleague, a quiet man who asked more about the weather than the files. "What did winter protect you from besides a man?" he asked. "From being interesting in the wrong way," Elaine said. "From pity," Priya said. "From being wrong on the record," I said. He suggested boundaries that looked like kindness with fences. Family questions answered only in rooms we choose. No responding to porch curiosities. No assigning each other jobs we didn't apply for. Priya the privacy officer, me the historian, Elaine the penitent. We wrote conditions. If we revisit the tapes, we stop after 20 minutes and walk. If we argue about dates, we make tea before we talk. If anyone wants a break, the answer is yes. I drafted a 1-page family addendum. Not legal, just promised. We tell each other first. We assume love before error. We file the truth, but we file it gently. Elaine signed it with a flourish like she was releasing a bird. Priya signed it, as if notarizing cautious hope. I signed it twice by accident and laughed at my own eagerness to belong to a document that didn't require a judge. We cleaned the basement. Finally, lifting bins like bales, labeling shelves so the future wouldn't have to guess. Mr. Ruiz dropped by with lemon bars and gossip we declined to hear. "Boundaries," he said, approvingly, as if grading a paper. Out front, Shoreline Avenue glittered under a thin rain, the kind that keeps secrets and hydrates roses equally. Elaine put a new battery in the smoke alarm, then looked at me and touched my cheek with a puzzled tenderness I didn't expect to recognize. "You cataloged me," she said, "and somehow I feel lighter." "I filed the fear," I said. "You're a new folder now." We taped the SEAGLASS envelope shut again and stored it where we choose instead of where a storm throws it. Then the doorbell rang with the deliberate patience of someone who knows exactly which room they're visiting tonight. The visitor was the kind of silence that wears a uniform, a courier with a padded envelope, signature required. Inside, a letter from St. Albans acknowledging the amended note in my file and a photocopy of the redacted line, now complete. Observation after concussion and lock change incident. Discharge stable. Follow-up required. There was also a short handwritten note from the records office clerk with the soft voice. "Families keep braver secrets than outsiders imagine." Be well, Jay. I stood in the doorway and let the ocean's damp salt fold into the ink. I thought about the job I love, about how archives aren't cathedrals to certainty, but bridges over places where stories drop away. Mr. Ruiz says advice is just a roadmap for people who like to drive. Here's mine. If you're listening from your own winter, write down the dates, yes, but also write down the smells and the cabinets and who reached for what without thinking. Memory is a neighborhood. It matters which streetlight you stand under. Protect what must be private, but don't bury living histories under duct tape because weather will find them. We didn't become saints. We became accurate. We didn't fix the past. We put its label where it belongs. Today, Elaine texts me photos of gulls and asks if Mr. Ruiz's lemon bars count as fruit. Priya calls to ask how to back up voicemails, then tells me she did it already. I walk to the pier some mornings before work and wave at the water like an usher greeting latecomers to a show that's already in progress. The horizon looks like a sealed envelope you don't need to open to trust. On the calendar, I write, simply, spring. Then I put the pen down because repetition is not repair, but it is how we practice new weather. And when the wind stirs, the old tape hiss in my head quiets enough for me to hear the small, ordinary good things coming. I lock the basement door and, for once, I don't listen for a second click. Then I hear the familiar, careful voice again, but this time it comes from inside me.